further destination, capturing that kind of spirit of can do and nothing's impossible, and harnessing it in that way, I just think I think that's something that could be a tremendous force for good.
Okay, I think I'll take 3 questions now, given how long Ruth's answers are.
I'm sorry, I'm really chatty today. I'm really sorry.
What's ticking here? We've got 19 minutes to ask the leader of the Scottish Conservatives the question you've always wanted to. Right, sir, right at the back, and then these 2 hands. You were in a kilt, sir?
Yes.
Good effort. Good. Okay, 3.
Hi, thank you. I spent some time growing up in Scotland as a kid, so I want to ask you about the independence referendum that Nicola Sturgeon is still wanting to do. Do you think that by keep on going on about the independence referendum that she is betraying every single Scottish person living in there with the result that was settled a couple of years ago?
Okay, second question.
Alistair Campbell, Scotland, United Kingdom. Do you think the Scottish cohort at Westminster will do what their leader said they would do and stop interfering in English affairs?
And the third?
Do you think one of the big problems for the Conservatives and Labour in Scotland is a lot of the top talent wants to go down to Westminster, and the SNP focuses in Holyrood, and so more of the kind of top talent like you, Ruth, should consider being staying in Holyrood for the foreseeable future?
Oh, you smooth talking devil. Well, I'm just gonna bask in that one for a little bit, and I'll come back to that. I'll do the first 2, and then I'll get to there. Did you say that you lived in Glenrothes for a bit?
I lived in Edinburgh at a for a few years.
Edinburgh. Yeah. Well, I think. I mean, I'm long on record. I think that Nicola Sturgeon. I think it ill becomes her, and I think it ill becomes the post of First Minister. The way in which she's tried to exploit the vote on Brexit to try and put independence back on the table. Because the people across Scotland were told that the independence referendum would be once in a generation. You know, she said that over and over again. She personally signed an agreement between our 2 governments to say that the result would be respected. And it was a clear result. 10 points is a clear result. And I think in terms of the way in which she's tried to exploit it, standing up within 3.5 hours of the vote and saying she'd already instructed Scottish Government officials to draw up a second independence referendum, the legislation for it. You know, I think even she now has realised that she maybe went too far and is pulling back a bit from it. Because there was a deal that was done between politicians and the people of Scotland in September 2014, and we said that this will be a big, broad, open debate. There will be a time to discuss everything in its turn. There will be ability to question people on both sides at every level. And if there is full engagement, and if people take it seriously, and if they go to the polls, and if they cast their vote, then what you decide will be what happens to Scotland. You have the power for the future of our country in your hands. And that big, broad debate did happen. And people went to the polls, and people paid attention, they asked questions, they got involved. People went to the polls, and they voted in numbers and of a ratio that has been unseen either before or since. 85% turnout for an electoral event in Scotland. And it was a big 10-point win for remaining in the Union. 28 out of Scotland's 32 local authority areas said that they wanted to stay. And now she says, actually, none of that matters. That doesn't count. We're just going to ignore it. And I think what's really interesting is we have no lack of polling and self-examination in Scotland. It goes on all the time. And even since the 24th of June, there's been a number of Scotland-only polls. And every single one of them, the same as we've seen in the last 2 years, that support for independence or staying part of the Union is broadly the same. But in every poll, support for having a second independence referendum has gone down and down and down. So even people that support independence are saying they don't want the divisive referendum campaign, that it has split the country, that now is the time, as we were promised, we would come back together and we would get past this. I think particularly as the challenges of Brexit becomes clear and the questions are being articulated, it is important to say that even if, like me, you were on the side of Remain and you wanted to stay part of the European Union, none of the questions that Brexit thrown up are answered by ripping us out of another union that's 4 times more important to us in terms of trade, that sees so much cross-border cooperation and is, an agreement that we've built over centuries with our nearest neighbours and closest friends. So that kind of also steps into the point from Alistair there about the SNP quote-unquote interfering in English affairs. I think people have to realise why the SNP are doing it, why they want to get involved on issues like fox hunting that doesn't apply to Scotland, why they want to get involved in things like Sunday trading that don't apply to Scotland or only exist within England or England and Wales. And it's to annoy you. It is to get up the nose of people in England. It is on purpose. They know, as we do, and as people in Quebec and Canada know, that one of the things that people vote for when they vote to stay part of a wider union in a referendum on the Constitution is because the union that they want to stay part of tells them that we want you to stay. There's polling and research evidence that shows that, particularly in the second Quebec referendum, where it was really close, where it was half a point, that the difference that pulled them back from the secessionist polls showing secessionism winning in the week before the referendum to it being a vote to stay was because the rest of Canada said we want you to stay. So it is absolutely incumbent on the SNP and their 56, 55, 54, 50, however many MSPs they've got left, to get on the UK papers and get on the UK television and get in the homes of people in England and Wales as often as they can and say things to annoy you. So you say, actually, you whining Scots, will you please just leave? That is part of what they're building to try and change the debate in Scotland. So it's absolutely cynical. And I just think that you should be aware that that's what they're trying to do.
It's working on John Cleese now.
He's just hacked off with you.
But you see, is that why, for example, that if you're a French student, you don't pay for tuition in Scotland, but if you're English, you do? Do you think free personal care?
That's European law.
Pardon? That's
European law.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
But do you think that things like free health for the elderly, things like that, are designed to antagonise?
No, actually, I don't on that case. I think that the disparity in university fees absolutely does antagonise people, and I'm not surprised. I think that it is a nonsense that somebody from Birmingham who studies in Edinburgh has to pay thousands of pounds, but somebody that comes from Barry in Italy to study in Edinburgh doesn't have to pay a penny. That there's no contribution from people from other EU countries to our to the universities that are helping.
But soon we'll be out of the EU, and that'll be a result, won't it?
Well, actually, in terms of that. I know that universities in Scotland are already having conversations about their fee structure and what happens next, and as a revenue raiser. So those discussions are going on. I think in terms of things like free personal care for the elderly, that was the last Labour Lib Dem administration in Scotland. It was their policy. It has come into some practical difficulties, but I think that. That wasn't a constitutional choice that they made. That was a choice about how we manage social care in the future. So I think I have to say I give them the benefit of the doubt of that. But to come back to the very excellent point by that gentleman in the specs about top talent.
Wait, before you answer that, can I do a quick show of hands? Who would like to see Ruth and Theresa May's cabinet? Now look at that. Are you going to disappoint all these people?
Let me see. The people that didn't raise your hand, are you all Scottish? Because you realise I've got a job to do to keep English in check. Is that right? Yeah, good. Well, as delighted as I am to have a standing invitation as I had before to political cabinet, I'll be staying out of Her Majesty's government's cabinet for some time because I've got a job to do in Holyrood and I intend to do it. But I think there are questions about, particularly as devolution matures, and not just for Scots, but for people in Wales and Northern Ireland as well, about where they want to be a politician. And you've seen. For some, like Alex Salmond, he can't make up his mind because it's now 3 times he's skipped backwards and forwards. But if you're interested in macroeconomics or defence or foreign affairs or international development, then you want to go and sit in the House of Commons because that's where those decisions are made. If you're a Scot and you're interested in social care, in health policy, in education policy, you want to go and sit in Holyrood because that's where those decisions are made. And actually I think we should probably, as we continue to mature as a parliament, and the settlement across the UK continues to mature, I actually think we'll probably get less hung up on where people sit. And I think you will see more people from the devolved administrations becoming UK-wide figures rather than just figures where they are. I mean, I think actually you've seen with the London mayoralty how that can work. You know, Ken Livingstone, Boris Johnson and now Sadiq Khan are talking to the whole country, but from their base in London. And I think that actually Nicola Sturgeon is widely recognised throughout the whole UK. I think that there are others that are too. Carmen Jones doesn't seem to want to use that platform particularly, but I mean that's a decision for him. But I think as we go on, actually, you will begin to see a lot more movement between parliaments, and I think that's probably quite healthy. But in terms of any of my newly elected MSPs, you're a fabulous team. I want to keep you. We put a lot of effort into getting you elected. You are going nowhere.
Okay, 3 more questions. Get my Torquil and Mike. These are former journalistic colleagues of mine who are almost certainly going to ask you about Brexit.
Well, no, I wasn't going to Brexit. The other day, Ruth, you declared your ambition to be First Minister in the next 4 or 5 years. You're going to have to do that on the back of Labour votes, aren't you? And this ties into what Fraser was saying about branding. How are you going to get Labour switchers to back a Tory to be First Minister?
Well, I think, first of all, Labour nor any other party doesn't own voters in any part of the UK or in Scotland. I think that we have already seen people who had never voted the Conservative Party before or in recent decades vote for our party at this election in May, quite self-evidently. We went from 250,000 votes to over 500,000 votes, you know, from the last Scottish election to this one. So, you know, there's 250,000 people that didn't vote for us last time that voted for us this time. And I think that the way in which you do that is you talk to their concerns. So you speak about what you would do differently, how you would help their family, how you would help improve schools policy, how you would help making sure that there's opportunities for their children as they grow up, what you're going to do for them to encourage commerce, business, trade, what you're going to do in terms of keeping some money in their own pockets so they make decisions about, you know, how they spend that money better than the state makes decisions. These are some of the questions about that relate to why I became a Conservative in the first place and what I believe. And I think one of the things that is important in politics is actually making sure that you speak that truth as quietly and clearly as you can, because I think people can see through if you try and do the, sort of slightly coming back to Fraser's branding question, if you're just trying to kind of put a sheen on something or pretend that something's not what it is, actually I don't think people have respect for you for that. I think they would rather, even if on some of the areas that you talk about you disagree with them, I think that they would rather you had that full, frank, honest exchange and explained why you wanted to do things. And that's the approach that I'm going to take over the next 5 years.
But in short, what is your brand?
Well, we're the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. We stand up for hard-working people across the country. We believe in aspiration and opportunity, and we believe head, heart, body and soul in protecting our United Kingdom.
Here's here.
You're pleased to know this is a Brexit question. Given the nationalists' underlying mission, do you think that the talks between the UK government and the Scottish government can end in anything other than a constitutional car crash?
That depends on good faith from the SNP. We've already seen demonstrations of good faith from the UK government this week in terms of making sure that Nicola Sturgeon was informed in advance of the announcements on timetabling and the repeal bill at the start of the week on Sunday. You know that both the current Prime Minister and actually the previous Prime Minister made it very, very clear and have repeatedly said that they want to ensure that the devolved administrations, including the Scottish Government, are involved and consulted at every point in this process. In terms of David Davis, making sure that within days of Mike Russell's appointment, Mike Russell is the minister that has been charged from the Scottish Government to be the liaison in charge of Brexit, as David Davis is opposite number, to make sure that that meeting took place. So, do I think that the SNP are going to try and continue to use this as a lever for independence? Yes. Do I wish they wouldn't? Yes. I mean, I think the evidence so far has been that they will. But genuinely, there's some big questions here that need answered, and I think that it would be important, I think it would be necessary that the Scottish Government takes on board the needs of different sectors in Scotland, people that are looking for either opportunities or protections throughout this process, that they engage in good faith with the UK Government about what they are. Now, I'm already doing lots of work in terms of sitting down with people from different sectors in business, in finance, in fishing, in farming, in energy, and all these things about what they're looking for out of the negotiations. I know that my colleague David Mundell in the Scotland office and his deputy Lord Dunlop are doing the same. They've held dozens of meetings across Scotland. That's all being fed into a process, but actually we need the Scottish Government to step up too, and I've been saying that throughout the last few days of this conference. And yeah, we'll judge them by their actions.
Last three questions. At the end, 1, 2, and 3.
Hello, my name is Emma Supple. I'm a big fan, thank you very much. There's a huge amount of emphasis on the women now who are taking charge, and you're sitting in front of the banner of social justice. And I wondered if you could give a comment to the female politicians who are having to share their very private information about whether they're mothers or not, or whatever's happened in their journey, and how that's going to affect, because where's the flexibility if you need to have a job, but you can't have a job because you've got to be in childcare, etc. My son here is a mother of 3, and if I had a parent who asked me who's looking after them, their father, that's irrelevant. It's who's looking after. And I'd just be curious as a female politician, and with all the women in charge, just your takes on how personal it gets. Thank you.
Do you mind if I answer that one just myself before we go to the other two, actually? Because I think that's a really interesting question. I think you're seeing things change in subtle ways. I think as someone who, as well as having that added dimension of being a woman who's of childbearing age, but having that dimension of coming into politics where I was already out, so people already knew that I was gay, there'd been lots of questions about my private life, and I always kind of promised myself that, well, I didn't want to be known as the gay politician because there's so much else that I want to talk about. You've seen how fast I talk. I'm trying to get lots of things out there. I would always step up, and I would always answer as openly and as honestly as I could questions about my personal life in that way, because actually you've got to make it easier for the people that come up behind you. It's very much down to the individual. In terms of what I've tried to do is to be as open and honest as I can. It never occurred to me, I never really bought into this idea of role modelling when I was growing up. I was kind of always that sort of tough, slightly annoying, loud tomboy that thought that they could rule the world, and when they fell over they just cut their knee, they just got back up and tried again anyway. And anyone telling me I could do anything, I just wanted to do it twice as much. So it never really mattered to me, but when I did become leader, I got so many emails, mostly from young women, but from some young women too, and teenagers and people still at school talking about how it was important to them that somebody who had been gay became the leader of a political party in Scotland. And it had literally never crossed my mind that me winning that election, getting that job, would matter to anybody else in Scotland. Like, why would it impact on them? But that's what made me make sure that I personally, and it's my personal choice, that when asked, I will always try and answer as openly and as honestly as I can. Now that doesn't come without a cost. And that's a cost that I've chosen to engage with and pay. Because it does mean that there are parts of my life that I want to keep silent, that I want to keep, not out of secrecy, but just out of me. Just, you are seen in public a lot. You have to give a lot of yourself. You get unbelievable amounts of abuse on social media. You get judged in so many ways. You have your motives dissected by people all of the times about what you're doing. And you do have to have that part of yourself that you can shut the door on and go home and, have a wee cry if you need to have a wee cry, or get a hug if you need to have a hug, or just, kick the wall if you need to kick the wall. So sometimes you do feel as if you're having to give too much. I think what's important is actually how the role of women is changing in politics. We are now at a stage where you've got the leader of the UK Conservative Party, the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, the leader of the SNP, the leader of Plaid Cymru, even the leader of UKIP, the leader of Scottish Labour, are all women. You know, now that hasn't happened by accident, and the reason that we didn't have that number of people in public life and at the top of public life before, that didn't happen by accident either. Things are changing. They are not where they need to be. But for every Ruth Kelly, who had children while she was in high office, for every Karen Bradley, for people that go off, have maternity leave, come back, for every person that comes out, or for everybody that shows that it can be done, and that my life and my job don't cancel each other out, you make an advance and you make it easier for the people that come behind. So I think that questions regarding child as politicians, I think, are crass. I have a picture on my phone that's brilliant. It was in the Sunday Times about 4 weeks ago, and it was a sidebar to a much larger piece. And it had at the top, I took a picture of it because it was brilliant. It just says, childless politicians, and it has Angela Merkel, Theresa May, me, and sort of 3 other people. Not a single man. Apparently men are not childless politicians, even if they have children. But it literally, that's it. I did have a bit of a whack at the Sunday Times for that one, and to be fair, I think they kind of had a reassessment and acknowledged that actually probably was a bit crass. But sometimes you have to just be a bit punchy like that, and I think there is a duty on all of us actually to make it easier for those that come behind. So yeah, do you know it's not fair, and yeah, it's really annoying, and yeah, you will have to answer questions about it. But every time that you do, and you do in a dignified manner, you demonstrate and you live the fact that you can have the life that you choose, and that you and your husband and your children have chosen to have. And you can do the job that you choose, and you shouldn't be inhibited from doing that, then you make it easier for the next person. So that's what I would say.
Out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for coming. Look, if you guys want to follow her afterwards, I'm sure she'll answer your questions. But thank you. Look at this big, massive audience you've got here. I mean, all we need is for you guys to move to Scotland and start looking conservative, and you might actually be onto something. So please join me in thanking Ruth Davidson.